Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about a few theories I have about the vocations that have been revealed in Dragon's Dogma 2. We got the main trailer that came out about 2 weeks ago, and now we've got some more information on potential vocations coming out in the final game, so I figured now would be as good a time as ever to present a few theories that I have about what we could potentially be getting in this game. I've also done some cursory research on both the wiki and also vocations from Dragon's Dogma Online in order to give this video a bit more context. Before the video officially kicks off, a big thanks to The Rift. If you don't know who they are already, they are a prominent Dragon's Dogma content creator, and they have allowed me their permission to go ahead and show off some of the Dragon's Dogma Online content that they have on their own channel, so make sure you check them out. A link will be in the description for both the playlist and the Rift's channel. But for now, let's get into everything we know about Dragon's Dogma 2 Vocations. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 Vocations are very similar to Dragon's Dogma 1, with the exception of coloring. You see, basic vocations have lighter basic colors, and advanced vocations have darker basic colors, with hybrids being a mix of the two that comprise the hybrid vocation. So for Fighter, Warrior, and Mystic Knight, for example, Fighter is a lighter tint of red, Warrior is a darker tint of red, and Mystic Knight is a tint of both red and blue, blue being borrowed from the magic class Mage. I have seen some arguments here and there for potential cases of additional vocations given the different tints of each color. However, I don't think that this is the case. I believe that generally if a vocation has a tint of the color red in it, that is meant to serve as a portion of that particular color's archetype. We'll go more on that later, but for now, let's go over the three different possibilities that I personally see in terms of what we might be getting in Dragon's Dogma 2's vocations. To preface this, I would like to point out that in the demos that we have been witnessing among many different content creators, it seems that we as the player character have a choice of 4 basic vocations, that being Fighter, Archer, Mage, and Thief. In addition to this, we also see from many different demos that the player character seems to start in the region of Vermund, and the story will pick up from there as opposed to the Canyon region Batal. The starting vocations that are available to the Arisen are also independent of the Arisen's race, meaning that if you start out as a Beastren, it seems that you still get access to Fighter, Archer, Mage, and Thief. I preface this to say that I have been seeing a whole lot of arguments from different content creators that maybe potentially different races could determine which starting vocations you actually have access to. And personally, I do not find that to be the case. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of evidence for it, given the fact that in the demos, we get an opportunity to play as the Fighter vocation with a Beastren character. And I think the main catalyst for this theory is the fact that all gameplay that we see from the Trickster seems to indicate that it comes from the region of Batal. The footage that we have for the Trickster vocation seems to be located in Batal, and also the weapon type, the Censer, seems to be more in line with the priestly order that we see in Batal from the game's trailer. Now, given that we pretty much know that Batal is a region that we get to a bit later in the story, I don't think we'll be starting out with any pink or purple vocations as is indicated by the Trickster vocation colors. With that same fact, given that hybrid vocations also must have corresponding colors to basic vocations, it's possible that we unlock both pink and purple vocations later on. To the pink and purple point, I've also seen a joke video by The Rift that has been posted that changes the hue of the Trickster class to reflect both green and blue vocation colors. However, I don't think that was meant to be a serious point, but just in case you are one of the ones that believe such a thing, that blue is going to be a component of 3 hybrid classes, I hope to debunk that here in this video. So with that being said, I do believe that the 4 basic vocations, Fighter, Archer, Mage, and Thief, will indeed be the only ones available to the Arisen at the start of their journey, and pink and purple may be unlocked later in the story. As an additional side note, there's also been footage gathered of different guards having spears, including one of the main characters, Manella, that we find in Batal. The general logic of Dragon's Dogma, including from the first game, is that if a NPC can equip a weapon, then the Arisen can typically equip it as well, and it turns into its own class. Given that each vocation happens to have its own particular weapon, including different hybrid vocations seeming to have their own weapon as well, it stands to reason that a character having a spear would indicate indicate that there is a designated spear class. By the way, I know I'm saying vocation and class interchangeably. Just bear with me on that. I'm sorry, it's a habit. But this is not to be confused with the duo spear that is being wielded by the Arisen as part of the Mystic Spear Hand class. And I know that this seems like kind of a tangent for no reason, but it will make sense here in this example that I'm about to provide. So let's look at the 3 different permutations that I personally see with each of these vocation colors and how they might be related to each other, and what we can use to discern what potential vocations could be appearing in the future as well. So the first possibility is that we have region-based vocations, meaning that red, yellow, blue, and green are going to be locked to the Vermund region, and pink and purple might be locked to the Batal region. This possibility assumes that there is no hybrid vocation between green and purple or red and pink in the diagram as I have drawn it out here. So again, as you can see, green is cut off from purple, but purple and pink are able to mingle here to create the hybrid vocation Trickster. This would mean that the Batal region has 1 hybrid vocation, and the Vermund region would have 4 hybrid vocations if we follow Dragon's Dogma 1's logic of all the vocations of each region linking together to form a circular pattern. Now in this diagram, given that the vocations in the Vermund region are 4, there's different ways that you can rearrange this, but I'm going to draw on some context clues from the website in order to definitely get some kind of order going here. So the first thing I want to point out is that Mystic Spear Hand has the blue side of its hybrid vocation off to the right, and the Magic Archer hybrid vocation has its blue over to the left side. Now what this tells me, if we follow the diagram, is that Mage is in between both of these right here, providing the blue. So for Mystic Spear Hand, this would mean that the red vocation Fighter is going to be over to the left-hand side, and Archer is going to be over to the right-hand side of the Magic Archer vocation. This kind of leaves green on an island by itself, whether it's going to be to the right of the Archer vocation or if it's going to be to the left of the Fighter vocation. Not really sure, but going with the order that we were shown these vocations in one of the gameplay trailers, I'm going to elect to place it towards the right of the Archer vocation. I think that order is important. Either way, in this particular case, if we're saying that each region is specific to each of its hybrid vocations, this would mean that we get a red and green vocation. I'll get into the color archetypes a bit later, but given that red is more of an offensive and defensive type, and that green is more of a fully offensive type, it makes sense that this could be where the spear goes as a hybrid vocation. The Fighter vocation also has a shield, so there could be some defensive capabilities here too, but I would lean more towards agility and offense, similar to what the dagger has. So this particular one leaves room for a spear vocation, and also we have the, of course, advanced red warrior vocation, we have the advanced blue sorcerer vocation, as well as openings for advanced yellow and advanced green. This would leave Batal having only pink and purple vocations originating from it, with advanced purple and advanced pink, as well as the hybrid Trickster class. While we're on the subject of the Trickster vocation, let's go ahead and talk about its archetypes pink and purple. Given that the Trickster is an illusionist and also involves buffs and debilitations as well as summoning different apparitions, I believe that this is a mix between sort of a summoner class and a priest class. Strangely enough, there is a vocation in Dragon's Dogma Online called the Priest, which served more of a support role. I believe that this would fit quite nicely as the basic pink vocation here for Batal. So all that leaves is for the purple vocation to be determined. Given the summoning of apparitions, I do believe that we can put a summoner class here. What the actual vocation name will actually be, I do not know, but we might even broaden it a little bit to fit in with some vocations later that I'm going to theorize, maybe more of a conjuration class. The thought here being that conjuration not only serves to summon different things, but it also leaves room for more arcane style attacks as well. So for advanced pink and advanced purple, I believe advanced pink will be more of the alchemist type class here that we also see in Dragon's Dogma Online, that focuses on debilitations and also is in a more of a tanking role, more of a supportive role for the team. I also believe that this method of vocation lends itself well to the Batal region given the beliefs around the Lambent Flame. Of course, that leaves advanced purple, which I personally believe could be more of a necromancy class. It's not exactly the most original idea. I know that many people have brought this up before, but I just believe that it fits from a summoner class. We already had elements of necromancy necromancy. In fact, I believe that there was actually a skill called necromancy in Dragon's Dogma 1, so it only makes sense that we get some sort of expansion on that as a vocation, given that we see this type of art performed many different times in the Dragon's Dogma games. So as far as archetypes go, that leaves the Trickster being a mix of a summoning type vocation and more of a supportive role type vocation, which Trickster seems to line up pretty well as gives hints towards the pink and purple vocations. Seems to fit pretty well. And in that same vein, you could also apply that logic to the Mystic Spear Hand, and involves the offensive side of the fighter vocation combined with the magical capabilities of the mage vocation. So I think that fits pretty well too. And you could say the same for Magic Archer, providing the ranged capabilities of the archer class, as well as providing more of the supportive capabilities from the mage vocation as well. If you want to overanalyze this particular notion of hybrid vocations, you could say that hybrid vocations tend to take one half of the equation from each different vocation. So the logic here being that red as a fighter vocation, for example, having both offensive and defensive capabilities, Mystic Spearhand seems to take more of the offensive role here. This makes room for the defensive side of the red vocation to be given off to another hybrid vocation. And this will play quite nicely into the next possibility that I envision here, having more of a Dragon's Dogma 1 approach to all these vocations, and that is that there is no region specificity, but there is a closed loop as far as vocations go. As you can see here in this diagram, I have the following order for these vocations going red, blue, yellow, green, purple, then pink, with pink and red linked together to form sort of a hexagon. And as you can see with the different hybrid colors that I've made here, we can see that there is only 2 hybrid vocations per color, and that is in a closed loop with no crossing in between. This style of vocation would give us 6 hybrid vocations, 6 basic vocations, and 6 advanced vocations. Now that brings us to 18 total vocations, which is double what Dragon's Dogma 1 has, and this gives the Arisen 6 different hybrid vocations that are exclusive to them to choose from, which personally I think is a pretty good number given that you can opt into any of the other basic or advanced vocations. I personally believe that twice the amount of vocations from Dragon's Dogma 1 is sufficient for a sequel, and I think that it's honestly a pretty good number. There's not too much analysis paralysis, and there's not too little choices either. When compared to the third possibility that we have, which I have conveniently named Anything Goes, where hybrid vocations are just any permutation of any basic vocation ever, I do find this pretty favorable. The third possibility would give us 27 different vocations, which I believe has 15 different hybrid vocations that are all exclusive to the Arisen, which means that you're leaving a lot on the table if you choose to pick one hybrid vocation over another, and to be honest, I really just don't find this very likely at all, so I'm going to stick with possibility number 2 given the Dragon's Dogma 1 logic. And in this particular diagram, you can see that I've put green in between yellow and purple, and there's a reason for this, and I think it's personally because of the order that we mentioned earlier in the gameplay trailer. Given that Thief was the last one to be mentioned, I believe going from left to right, this makes sense for it to be the last one in the Vermund category, so to speak. And personally, I like the hybrid vocations that come up from this combination of green and purple, and also red and pink as well. By the way, I just want to mention that I wrote a note in my script to keep this to 8 to 10 minutes for the total video, and we're clearly about to get into some higher theorizing, so yeah, that goal is definitely not on the table here anymore. Alright, so before we get into the hybrid vocation theorizing, let's go ahead and lay out the different attributes for each different vocation color. Red is obviously a mix of offense and defense. You have a sword and a shield, should be fairly self-explanatory, so we'll go with attack and defense for this particular vocation color. We then have blue for the mage vocation, seeming to give both offensive and supportive magic types. Yellow seems to be more of a ranged offense, although you could argue that there are defensive capabilities here as well, but I'm going to lean more towards the offensive type. You could also argue for an attribute of agility here as well. Green for the thief vocation is obviously focused on offense and agility, so we'll keep those two attributes there. Now you heard some of my attributes earlier for purple and pink. Purple I think is going to be more of a conjuration class, so we'll go with conjuring, summoning, and offensive magic types. I'm personally not 100% sold on the offensive magic types for the purple color vocation, but I can make an argument for it, as usually conjuration is seen as more of an offensive spell type, so there's room there I would think. And pink I'm just going to label as a fully support color. This is going to be more more status effects. This is going to be support, healing, that sort of thing. And that thought, of course, is given by the Trickster vocation, applying buffs to different pawns and also providing debilitations to different enemies. Notice that I didn't apply any sort of offensive typing to pink because, as you can see from the Trickster vocation, there isn't any direct damage being dealt from that vocation at all. It's more of a sideline support type. So I think that mostly comes from the pink vocation, given this theory that I have going on here. So using the logic that I've provided for the different colors and the different attributes that they carry with them, let's move on to confirming that theory with the hybrid vocation Mystic Spearhand and Magic Archer. The Mystic Spearhand seems to be a class mostly focused on offensive capabilities. If I had to argue for it, it would seem to carry over the offensive side of the red vocation and the magic offense side from the blue vocation, thus making an all-out offensive class between both physical and magical damage for the Mystic Spearhand. If we want to apply that same logic of hybrid vocations getting half of all the attributes from one vocation and the other half of that same color vocation being handed over to another hybrid vocation, then we can look at the Magic Archer hybrid and we can say that the blue from the Magic Archer vocation is the supportive side of the Mage vocation, and the yellow side is more of the ranged offense side of the Archer vocation. And I know that analysis is not 100% perfect, given that the Magic Archer also has offensive capabilities with magical bolts, but I think it mostly lines up with my way of thinking here. This is honestly the part of the theory that I'm most shaky on, so if you want to provide your own solution in the comments, please do so. So the hybrid vocation slots that we have to fill are yellow and green, green and purple, and pink and red. Now, if we skip around here, I just want to make a quick point about the pink and red combination here. If we want to follow the logic that half of a vocation is given over to its hybrid and the other half to another hybrid, then we could make the conclusion that the offensive side of the red vocation is given over to Mystic Spearhand, and with the other half we're left with the defensive side of the red vocation. This is probably the highest amount of copium you'll ever see for a Mystic Knight hybrid vocation, but if you combine the defensive capabilities of the red vocation along with the supportive role of the pink vocation, then you could make a decent argument for why Mystic Spearhand would fit here as a pink and red hybrid. Now, I say Mystic Knight because it's probably the class you guys are most familiar with. However, I do believe that the color combination of the two pink and red vocations would be more closely aligned with the Dragon's Dogma Online version being Shield Sage. The description of the Shield Sage is as follows. It is a vocation that specializes in defense and limited elemental magic support that can attract enemy attention away from other party members, and they are armed with both a great shield and what seems to be a magical mace or a mini staff. It is meant as a tank archetype and is meant to draw aggro away from other party members. That last description should remind you a little bit of another hybrid vocation that we've already covered, given that it also involves aggro control as well. In fact, I would say the similarity is practically uncanny, and it almost makes complete sense for it to be the other half of the pink vocation. And you might see this as sort of a leap in logic, but I do believe it makes a lot of sense whenever you hear it after a few times. Given that Dragon's Dogma Online came after Dragon's Dogma 1 and Dragon's Dogma 2 seems to be leaning more towards a sort of weapon diversity style for each different vocation, meaning that vocations don't seem to share any weapons between each other, I do believe it makes sense to claim that each different vocation sort of has its own role and seems to be vastly more distinct between each other vocation, which is completely opposite to what Dragon's Dogma 1 did. If you play Dragon's Dogma 1, you notice that some classes are able to share weapons from other vocations. A prime example of this would be the Assassin vocation, which not only had a sword and bow, but also a shield and daggers. Now, you could only equip 2 of those at the same time, but the fact that they had access to all of that is the point I'm making here. Dragon's Dogma Online, being an MMO game, seemed to be more in line with most of its other competitors, meaning that each different vocation is sort of its own thing, and that concept seems to have carried over to Dragon's Dogma 2, given the lack of sharing of weapons from what we can see. And that concept of each vocation being its own role might not be the only thing that crosses over from Dragon's Dogma Online, as we're noticing quite a bit actually cross over other than just that concept. For example, you have the Seeker vocation, which is very reminiscent of the new Thief vocation that we see in Dragon's Dogma 2, although the Seeker is mainly focused on aerial combat, which does not appear to be making a return, but it does lay the groundwork for having daggers be its own separate vocation, and if we look at other examples, you can quickly see the point I'm making here. You can also see a similar thing going on with the Spirit Lancer vocation, with some of its abilities being given over to the Mystic Spearhand vocation. My point is there's plenty of room to assume that a lot of things from Dragon's Dogma Online will be crossing over to Dragon's Dogma 2, as well as cut content from Dragon's Dogma 1 that they were not able to put in. So with that being said, Pink and Red, I do believe, has a decent possibility of being a Shield Sage vocation. However, in that same vein, it might also be a good place for this new Spear vocation to be placed. My evidence for that being gameplay from the Spirit Lancer, although since a lot of that vocation has seemingly been put on the Mystic Spearhand, this might be a good opportunity for the Spear to be instead placed into the yellow and green hybrid vocation, which would include the semi-range capabilities of the Archer vocation, along with the quickness and offensive capabilities of the green vocation. And I'll be honest here, the main motivation to place the Spear in the yellow and green vocation would be its potential range capabilities of throwing the Spear. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how that would work if you throw the Spear and then are left without it for a while. So I'm not 100% sold on that, but I haven't really seen any gameplay of any Spear vocations either, other than Mystic Spearhand, but this would be just a single spear with a blunt end, not a duo spear like we see with the Mystic Spearhand vocation. And to be clear, this appears to be on the back of a guard and not on the back of a pawn, so that means that there's a possibility of it being a hybrid vocation, which means only the Arisen could use it, but there's so much unknown that I don't really feel 100% comfortable placing this as the hybrid vocation for yellow and green. On the other side of green, however, being green and purple, I do believe that this leaves a great opportunity to talk about the High Scepter vocation. This would combine the offensive and quick capabilities of the green vocation, along with the potential arcane capabilities of the purple vocation. What I have for you on screen right here is footage from the Rift showing off High Scepter gameplay, and personally, I really like this archetype. It's a katana with magic in the other hand. I've always been a very big fan of spell blades, and I personally, if this is in the game, I would probably pick this day one. It's so flashy, and there's also just amazing magic capabilities in this class. I really like it, and I think it really fits into the green and purple vocation mixture. And honestly, I'm so sold on that idea that I really want to place it here. That, and given the fact that Itsuno has also been mentioning his picking up of katanas recently, which may be a hint, also could be completely innocuous, but given that they've made a katana class with magic in the past in Dragon's Dogma Online, I really do think this would be a great place to put it as a hybrid vocation. That pretty much covers all my theories for hybrid vocations, but we can also talk about some of the advanced vocations that we have left, including Advanced Yellow, which personally I believe would fit very well as an arbalist with a crossbow archetype. And if that's not enough for you, there's also potential for it to be a dual crossbow, which is not unprecedented. I personally am a dual crossbow enjoyer in Baldur's Gate 3, and if that is a possibility, then I would love to play it in Dragon's Dogma 2 as well. There's also so many cool things you can do with a crossbow instead of a bow. It's less encumbering depending on the size of the crossbow, but it could also be very lumbering if you choose to put a full-on ballista in your hand. So, there's plenty of opportunities for a lot of emergent gameplay to come out of the arbalist vocation if that ends up being a thing. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, whenever we get over to Advanced Green, which I do believe is the last one that we have to fill out that I haven't already theorized about, a lot of people are putting the potential for a monk vocation to be here. If you ask me personally, I do believe that there is a huge possibility for there to be a monk vocation, given that it is featured as a vocation that was cut in Dragon's Dogma 1, and the Dragon's Dogma Twitter account has also posted it as a piece of cut content from Dragon's Dogma 1 that could potentially be making a return. We know that Itsuno wants to put a bunch of cut content from Dragon's Dogma 1 into Dragon's Dogma 2, so the possibility is definitely there. Whether or not it would be an advanced green, I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, the fact with this being an unarmed vocation just tends to not really fit that well with the typical vocation formula, as it's mostly based on weapons and skills based off of those weapons. I guess if you wanted to make a weapon for a gauntlet, or I don't know, some sort of monk belt or necklace or some sort of charm that they wear to indicate that they're monks, that could be a possibility, although maybe not very necessary. So I'm not 100% sold on the advanced green vocation being a monk. I think it's going to be something more based off of weapons. What weapon that could be, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. And honestly, I could go into all the possibilities of what it could be, but we'd honestly be here all day, as there's plenty of dual-wielded weapons in history. Or if it ends up not being dual-wielded at all, then who the heck knows? Maybe we'll get twin scimitars instead. I have no idea. Now, if you want to ask what I personally think would be a very cool idea, is to not have monk being the advanced green vocation, but instead have it be sort of the neutral vocation in the middle of this chart. I mean, think about it. You look at all the different vocations that we have here. Each one is based on a different weapon with different damage types, different weapon types. But imagine having no weapon. It would make sense if you just had sort of an off-color vocation right there in the middle that you don't need a weapon for. Seems like a cool concept. I don't know if that would actually happen, but either way, I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Let me know what you think. And also, for what it's worth, given the nature of the Batal region that we've seen so far, it might also be a vocation you could unlock in the Batal region if it ends up being a real vocation in the final product. Who knows? Anyway, I think I've made enough points in this theorizing vocation video to give some food for thought. Like I said before, I'll reiterate, I think that we're going to get more of a Dragon's Dogma 1 approach towards the vocation linking here. I think it's going to be a circle, which also symbolizes the cycle, which links into the story of the first game, and also it just makes for great variety. I also think I've made my point pretty well about Dragon's Dogma Online being a huge influence on the vocations of Dragon's Dogma 2, so let me know your thoughts about that as well. And also my Mystic Knight / Shield Sage Copium that I have put in the pink and red vocation slot. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I meant for it to be 8 to 10 minutes, but it turned into something closer to 27 minutes, so I'm not very good at timing, and I will be gone for the rest of the holiday season. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Hope you have a good time, and until then, I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.